On paper, Monster Hunter Wilds should not be a good game. It is a 40-hour grind fest with giant health bars and tiny damage numbers, multiple hour tutorials that bafflingly omit crucial information, traversal mechanics that punish you for exploring, series staple mechanics that were simplified beyond recognition while still staying restrictively overcomplicated, a miserably bad story that I could not be paid to care about, and online infrastructure so poorly designed you'd think the game was developed by Nintendo. And yet, it remains some of the most fun I've had all year. Because apparently, no amount of ass-backwards game design can dilute the transcendent feeling of running up to a giant, terrifying monster and absolutely going to town on it with a big, stupid anime sword that's also apparently a chainsaw. Please don't ask me any questions. I can't explain how any of this works. And with environments this rich, detailed, and immersive, a character customization system complex and varied enough to rival actual fashion games, diverse and creative monster designs that consistently impress me with how unique they manage to be while still sticking to the series formula, and a combat system polished to near perfection, it is kind of hard not to fall a little more in love with every beast you slay. Monster Hunter Wilds has more issues than I could ever hope to list, and I dread the idea of ever interacting with its multiplayer features, but not one of its problems could ever take away from that intense feeling of satisfaction that comes with watching a big giant monster fall to the ground and knowing that I did that. 2025 was a really interesting year for gaming. A lot happened, some good, some bad, some really fucking weird. If nothing else, you can't call it a slow news week. And if I'm being completely honest here, I really don't know where to start with this one. Hey guys, what we all looking at? You guys find like an elephant in this room or something? Damn it. Probably the biggest news of the year, Nintendo launched their most controversial console since the Virtual Boy and then proceeded to announce the second coming of the Virtual Boy. Mario Kart World was released to similar controversy, only to get absolutely bodied by Fast Fusion, Sonic Racing, Cross Worlds, and Kirby Air Riders. I will admit that Donkey Kong Bonanza was pretty cool, but from what I've heard, the new Hyrule Warriors and Metroid Prime were really not. Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour is a game that exists, no one can deny that, and Pokemon Legends Arceus was the most fun I've ever had with a game this disappointing. But that's just Nintendo. What was everyone else up to? I mean, it was a great year for sequels. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Ghost of Yotei both saw widespread acclaim on launch, followed by minimal long-term conversation. Death Stranding 2 made a lot of people question if Kojima is really that good of a writer before immediately turning around and saying, "Holy shit, dude, let this man cook!" Hollow Knight Silksong finally came out, Hades 2 finally came out, Citizen Sleeper 2 was an enormous improvement on its predecessor, unlike Splitgate 2, Enter Magnolia left early access, later followed by Slime Rancher 2, and Deltarune continued to be one of the greatest games ever made, despite only being halfway finished. But what else happened? Split Fiction had some of the most inventive level design in the platforming genre, paired with some of the most uninvented writing of the modern era. Doom the Dark Ages seemingly impressed everyone except for me specifically, while Once Upon a Katamari seemingly impressed me exclusively. Randy Pitchford spent the whole year belligerently insulting Borderlands fans, and then released Borderlands 4 in a barely functional state, only for it to end up being one of the best-selling games of the year anyway. Yeah, that'll show him. Fantasy Life I was a really cool Animal Crossing alternative ruined by one of the most mind-numbing stories of the entire year. Shadow Labyrinth was a dark and gritty Pac-Man themed Metroidvania that ultimately failed to live up to the creativity of its own premise. Fragpunk was fun for about a month. And Sega released the first ever Yakuza game that I genuinely don't care about at all. Ninja Gaiden made a comeback, Shinobi made a comeback, Silent Hill made a comeback, Lumines made a comeback, Danganronpa got announced, Batapon got a remake, Trails in the Sky got a remake. Close enough. Welcome back, the PSP. A ton of other classic JRPGs saw remakes this year alongside the game that shall not be named. Oh, don't worry. We're gonna talk about it. Uma Musume took the world by storm, and it's not exactly hard to imagine why. Fatal Fury City of Wolves made a lot of people very mad, but still ended up being a pretty good game. 2XKO, cool name by the way, made a lot of people very happy despite being utter dog shit, and Marvel Token looks concerning. Date Everything and Dispatch prove that there is still a mainstream commercial interest in dating sims and visual novels to a T. As This Seat Taken, The Root Trees Are Dead, and Blueprints made this a great year for puzzle game fans, and in a year that gave us Arc Raiders and Elden Ring Night Rain, Peak established itself as the must-play multiplayer game, which is very funny. Oh, and Ball Pit and Squeakcross narrowly missed this year's list. Those games were really cool. I'm looking for a good opportunity to mention Steal a Brain Rot. All in all, it felt like a very weak year for the AAA industry with very few exciting new big-name releases, largely propped up by a seemingly endless series of phenomenal indies with so many exciting new titles that it genuinely felt impossible to keep up. Me personally, I did my best. I played 161 games this year, almost 50 of which actually came out in 2025, and if that's not enough to convince you that I at least kind of know what I'm talking about, holy shit, are you gonna hate what happens next. In a year that saw a near endless barrage of expansive cinematic experiences and intense, beautifully written stories, Dispatch is the game that most consistently impressed me with the quality of its character writing. I was so immediately invested in everything the game had to say and each and every one of its larger-than-life personalities. The writing is so smart. The comedy, for all its unforgivable flaws and unbearable misses, is very witty. There is this natural air to the dialogue that allows even the most corny sentences and implausible personalities to fit into the story seamlessly. The game consistently manages to both subvert and play into established genre tropes and cliches in a manner that only serves to elevate what was already a very impressive project. Combine all that spectacular writing with a phenomenal cast of voice actors, genuinely engaging management mechanics, a cast of characters so likable that I just can't pick a favorite, let alone a top 5, and animation quality that rivals the best work of billion-dollar animation studios, and Dispatch ends up being one of the most unexpected and most deserving breakout hits from the past few years. Not to mention one of the best superhero stories in a decade full of great superhero stories. Please give me a season 2. From the development team behind 2018's jaw-dropping audio-visual masterpiece Tetris Effect comes the latest entry in my all-time favorite puzzle game franchise. And oh boy, what an entry it is. Lumines has always been a franchise known for its downright stunning music and visuals, and Lumines Arise is no exception. If anything, it might just be the best looking game the series has to offer. But visuals alone do not a good game make. It is instead what Arise manages to do with those visuals that makes it truly breathtaking. Much like with Tetris Effect and the Lumines titles before it, the team behind this game masterfully combines a diverse and imaginative roster of music and visuals with the series' deceptively complex falling block gameplay to elevate Lumines Arise from being a game about blocks that fall into a game about everything. One level takes place on a bustling city street, the blocks falling like rain upon a sea of umbrellas held by the dancing crowds below. Another takes place in a cyberpunk future with enormous skyscrapers that bathe the blocks in a rich neon glow. Another tells a tale of the passage of time through the lens of a single person's entire life. There's a level that takes place entirely on a secluded beach, sharing a much-needed vacation with a woman lounging nearby. Another is deep in the jungle, surrounded by the sounds of nature and the creatures of the earth. A personal favorite sees you parked on the edge of the horizon, an endless sky full of infinite possibilities stretching out before you. And this one is the fruits and vegetables level! Through its impressive use of audio and visuals, Lumines Arise evolves beyond simply being an incredible puzzle game, and instead becomes a mesmerizing, near transcendent experience, equal parts exciting and meditative, and there is very little else on the market that is anything like it. But is the game actually better than Dispatch and Monster Hunter Wilds? I don't know, but I liked Lumines more. Chalk it up to recency bias and let me have my weirdo picks. In a year full of long-awaited sequels to beloved games that take big swings and attempt to completely revolutionize the stories, mechanics, and gameplay of their predecessors, Hades 2 is exciting in all the ways it manages to remain familiar. That's not to say that Hades 2 doesn't iterate or innovate on the foundations set by the first game. If anything, the combat is more intense, the locations are more varied, the boon system has been thoroughly expanded. The story builds on the foundation set by the first game while still remaining thoroughly original. There isn't a single boss boss fight in Hades 1 that I enjoyed as much as Scylla, or a mini-boss as funny as that fucking rat. And the sheer amount of content, dialogue, upgrades, side quests, resources, core mechanics, and even characters have all been massively expanded. But what is most impressive is all the subtle improvements that Supergiant has made to Hades' existing formula. The relationship mechanics are far more involved, the weapon options are far more distinct, individual boons stand out from one another in ways that they failed to do in the first game. The additional resources add a layer of player agency to the upgrades and quest systems that just wasn't present in the original game. The side characters feel like a much more crucial part of the narrative, and the ability to explore both the underworld and the world of the living is such a cool way of just straight up doubling the amount of content that was present in Hades 1. In an era where developers are feeling increasing pressure to completely reinvent the wheel with every game they make, the developers at Supergiant Games have instead chosen to make a lot of smaller changes to existing mechanics, which has resulted in an already impressive game being honed to near perfection. Look, I get that a lot of people were very underwhelmed by a Hades sequel that just kind of ended up being more Hades 1. Hell, I was a little disappointed by it too. But I think we're kind of all forgetting that Hades 1 was already an incredible game, and Hades 2 is that, but significantly better. And Roger is an interactive visual novel that attempts to simulate the physical and emotional hardships associated with debilitating mental illness and chronic disability through an intense, intimate story and a frustratingly unintuitive control scheme. It is also the only game that I cannot describe in any detail for fear of spoiling way too much. But what I can describe is what this game did to me. The first chapter, amongst many other things, filled me with a level of dread and anxiety that no other game has ever managed to cause me. The second chapter filled me with this intense feeling of warmth and then proceeded to bring tears to my eyes multiple times through both joy and sadness. The third chapter had me shaking and crying from start to finish, and as pathetic as it sounds, I did indeed have to call my partner the second the credits rolled. Awkward! And Roger is a shockingly intense, deeply intimate, and emotionally charged story that completely blew me away and more than earned its trigger warning. It is, without a doubt, the single most emotionally impactful piece of media I consumed all year, and one of the most impactful stories I have experienced in my entire life. And somehow, it's still ranked below the Monkey Game. I am so sorry. Donkey Kong Bananza is indeed a Bonanza featuring Donkey Kong. This is a 3D platforming collectathon made by the same team that worked on Mario Odyssey, and you can immediately tell. There is this innate creativity present in every part of the game. I was repeatedly awestruck by individual levels, character designs, and platforming challenges. The distribution of the collectibles is simultaneously overwhelming and deeply satisfying. Even with all of the zero-effort freebies the game threw at me, I was still consistently excited by every new fossil and banana I found, especially when I actually had to work for them. The movement and platforming mechanics, as underutilized as they may be, feel like a direct evolution of 30 years of Donkey Kong Country gameplay. The animal transformations and terrain destruction mechanics, despite initially turning me off of the game, were very impressively implemented and allowed for some truly unique level designs and gameplay interactions. And the way that the game massively expands the Donkey Kong universe while also actively doubling down on the franchise's existing continuity was surprisingly gratifying after the past few years of near constant Donkey Kong Country erasure. Donkey Kong Bananza was loads of fun from start to finish, even despite some weaker levels near the middle of the game. And with major Nintendo releases becoming increasingly hit or miss, especially on the Switch too, it felt really nice to get a brand new mainline entry in a core franchise that felt like it was made by a passionate team of talented devs who were actually allowed to make the product they wanted to, complete with all of the charm and creativity you would expect from a major Nintendo title. Because as it turns out, when you actually let your devs make a good game, the game ends up being good. Who would have thought? I'm just gonna come out and say it. Citizen Sleeper 2 is quite possibly the single best written piece of media I have consumed all year, and even that might be selling it a little short. This game's writing is so creative and thoughtful and intelligent. It is a game overflowing with unique ideas and rich world building. The text is poetry, the dialogue is intricate and meaningful, the simplest of descriptions send chills down my spine. Each and every sentence of narration, line of dialogue, and bit of flavor text hide entire universes in the margins. This is a game that you almost exclusively interact with through walls of text with little to no visual imagery present to support its lengthy, eloquent writing, and yet it manages to be infinitely more immersive than these million-dollar cinematic experiences with their expansive open worlds and hyper-realistic graphics. And it is through this masterful writing, not to mention some much-needed gameplay improvements and some genuinely impressive art direction, that Citizen Sleeper 2 manages to not only massively expand the storytelling, world building, and gameplay mechanics established by its predecessor, but also manages to firmly establish itself as one of the best games of 2025. And speaking of phenomenal sequels to widely beloved indie games, in an era full of genre-pushing Metroidvanias, many of which were directly inspired by the original Hollow Knight Silksong manages to set itself apart and exceed industry expectations by simply being exactly what everyone already expected it to be. A massive improvement on what was already widely considered one of the best games ever made. From the second you boot up Hollow Knight Silksong, the leap in production quality is made immediately apparent. Cutscenes are fully animated, backgrounds are more intricate and detailed, the locations and enemy types are more diverse and distinct from one another, the atmosphere is more haunting, the darkness more oppressive. The story's presence is felt in every moment of gameplay and every detail of the level design. The boss fights feel pulled straight out of my nightmares, and the smallest tweaks to the combat, the platforming, the badge systems all lead to a game that feels so good to play that I almost don't care that the difficulty was cranked up so high that even the ordinary randos were beating my ass. In nearly every way, Hollow Knight Silksong feels like a massive evolution, not only on every single idea, mechanic, and piece of lore established by its predecessor, but on so many of the concepts pioneered by the very games that Hollow Knight helped inspire. Like any good studio should, the developers at Team Cherry built Silksong not only on their own foundation, but also on the foundation of the games that came after. They left no stone unturned, no idea unexplored, no concept unevolved, and outside of the frankly baffling omission of a few industry standard quality of life features, no question about its near perfection. Hollow Knight Silksong doesn't settle for simply being an improvement on its predecessor, but rather strives to become the next stage in evolution for the entire Metroidvania genre. And frankly, I cannot even begin to imagine how Team Cherry, or anyone else for that matter, could possibly push these concepts any further. But surely someone will. Someone always does. The ante will always be upped, and I, for one, am beyond excited to see how Team Cherry will respond this time. Blueprints feels like the game I have been waiting for all my life. It is a mystery-themed puzzle game with soft roguelite elements that is just overflowing with secrets to uncover and mysteries to solve. The game sees you exploring the seemingly infinite rooms, cupboards, and corridors of the Mount Holly estate, a mysterious, ever-shifting mansion that randomly rearranges its layout every time you enter it. The goal of the game is to traverse the building's 45 rooms, because the word infinite actually means 45, solving its many puzzles and slowly piecing together its mysteries, all in the hopes of finding your way to its secret 46th room. From a purely gameplay perspective, this is a very simple game, at least on the surface, but as you play more and more, exploring room after room, returning time after time, as you interact with the game's systems, discover its secrets, and solve its mysteries, slowly, Blueprints begins to peel back its many layers to reveal seemingly endless levels of complexity that elevate this game beyond simply a fun experience built on a good idea to something truly special. Blueprints is top to bottom a work of genius that manages to masterfully blend the unique attributes of the puzzle game and roguelite genres to create something that feels truly fresh and original. And through this freshness and originality, not to mention some brilliantly implemented puzzles and deeply fascinating world building, Blueprints manages to be instantly captivating, thoroughly engaging, and shockingly challenging even after the credits roll. And thank God that it does, because that's when the game truly begins.
Dim dim da 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 dim dim da 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 dim da di dum. Dim dim da 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 dim dim da 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 dim da di dum. Clair obscur, trouble de rature, trouvera effet. Clair obscur, bordé aux peintures, trouvera sans elle.
Simultaneously overrated and overhated, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 probably has the single best opening in any game I have ever played. Steeped in both inspirational hope and crushing grief, full of ominous foreshadowing and beautiful, evocative visuals, it is an endless series of gut punches that leave you begging for more. I don't think I've ever experienced an opening chapter in any game that had me this immediately invested in its world, this swiftly endeared to its characters, and this overwhelmingly excited to see what happens next. And the crazy part? It's all uphill from here. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a deeply beautiful game in more ways than one. It combines a heartfelt and deeply personal narrative about pain, grief, and all the ways we cope with loss with some of the most immediately likable and fully realized characters I have ever had the pleasure of meeting, and a gorgeous, heavily symbolic art direction that really supports the game's themes. The more I think about it, the more convinced I become that the thing that most impressed me about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is how much I liked it in comparison to every other game I played this year. In a year that gave us Hades 2 and Dispatch, Clair Obscur had my favorite cast of characters. In a year that gave us Silent Hill F and Citizen Sleeper 2, Clair Obscur had my favorite story. In a year that gave us Mario Kart World, Lumines Arise, and Once Upon a Katamari, Clair Obscur made any discussion about best soundtrack completely obsolete. In a year that gave us Hollow Knight Silksong and once again Silent Hill F, Clair Obscur had my favorite art direction and world design with rich, complex environments from start to finish. And in a year that gave us Monster Hunter Wilds and once again Hollow Knight Silksong, Clair Obscur had my favorite combat system. A combat system that brilliantly combined a parry system designed by a Sekiro speedrunner with combat mechanics pulled from every corner of the turn-based RPG genre. Expedition 33 managed to provide an infinitely complex, deeply satisfying, and shockingly brutal combat system that only gets better the more time you spend with it. I wouldn't go so far as to call it the greatest JRPG ever made, or the game that saved the genre, or even the best JRPG from the past 5 years, but between its heartbreaking story, complex characters, gorgeous visuals, rich world building, satisfying combat, complex battle systems, and phenomenal soundtrack, it is, at the very least, one of the best RPGs ever made. Probably also just one of the best games ever in general. Almost definitely the best game of 2025, although I do see the argument for Silksong. And without a doubt, the most fun I had with any game I played all year in a year where I played 161 separate games. Probably closer to 174 if we count the arcade games. TLDR, the game you hate is good. See you next year.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.